Alright guys, so I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be going over this system right here. So I did do this video earlier today, but it turned out a little bit longer than I wanted it to, so I am redoing it and I've organized my notes this time. So I'll be referring back to those here and there. So first of all, this will be in the next version. The one I'm showing you now is going to have fixes and changes in it that aren't currently in the other one. For some reason, whenever you first start it, there's like a delay sometimes. See, there wasn't a delay that time. You probably heard my key press, and then after like a second or two, it went. But anyway, I'm not real sure exactly what causes that. Seems to be an engine thing. So the speed actually is not going to seem significantly different. But I have actually slowed it down just a little bit so that the transition to idle is complete before we transition to the fighting stance. And you may notice as well that he's actually looking forward now. He's not looking off to the right and down. I fixed that as well. And we are getting complete transitions before we, or complete stop transitions before we transition to the fight. And this is the old one, so it may not be noticeable, but if you pay attention, the feet slide. The reason why the feet slide, I will go ahead and show you. So I'm just going to start my debugger, and I'm going to get it to do it again. Okay, so I'm going to stop it. And my camera is all bugged out right now, so I'm going to have to press the start button on my keyboard and change it over to follow. I wish they would fix that. Hopefully in the next one it'll be fixed. There's a lot of bugs with this whole camera system right here. It also teleports the player to other locations for some reason. Or the camera, I'm not even really sure, to be honest. It's so confusing when it happens that I'm not even really sure what exactly is happening. But anyway, so here you'll see the foot sliding right here on this one, and then he jumps. Now, the reason why is actually, if you look at this little bump right here, just as soon as the stop animation starts playing, just as soon as it starts blending in, no sooner has it fully blended in does it start blending out. So actually, I don't even think it's fully blending in before it starts blending out. And the reason why is because I was just simply completely interrupting the stop database whenever we become idle. I was saying skip stop and just go straight into idle. And so that's what we get. We get a kind of semi-blend to the stop, and then we play the idle transition. And that's the reason why it was doing that. So I did resolve that without slowing the transition down too much. There is a slight pause there. That's kind of unavoidable if you want those good transitions. And so now, if we come over here and we look at this stop forward left foot, you'll see that right here on this, right here on this one, the stop forward left foot, you'll see it fully blends in from the run start forward right foot. It completely blends in from that, and then it blends out into the transition to fight, as you can see. And then we enter our fight offensive idle. So I'll be going over why I did all that later on. Let me just check this because... Okay, so these are the things I need to discuss in this video to make it complete. It may still end up being just as long as the other one, but at least I'll have my thoughts organized and I won't be just drowning on about random stuff like I am right now, for example. All right. So why we transition back into the idle. So somebody was asking me this because, well, they were asking me, why do we transition back into the idle? Well, that basically goes back to this. I was actually trying to avoid transitioning back into the idle right here, but as you can see, it causes foot sliding. If we do completely disable the stop database and we just skip stop and go straight into the idle, it looks really weird because you go from a running to a dead stop. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, over the course of a single frame, all of a sudden his pelvis just completely stops. He does not slow down, and he just jumps up in the air and then pounces back down like this. There's no forward momentum. There's no sliding forward. He just completely stops. So it's not really a good approach to it. It looks really weird. You completely remove momentum, the forward momentum all at once, instantaneously, and it just don't look good. So the only way we would be able to just transition back into this and skip the or the stop transitions would be if we made our own stop transitions where we just move back into here. I did go through the animations to look to see which ones we would have to replace or modify, and there's over 55 animations. I don't know exactly how many. I'll go over them with you right here. If we go into animations, there's 8 idle. There's 8 idle turn in place animations. You would have to modify every single one of those. There are stop animations. Let me see. There's 20 walk stop animations we would have to modify. And then there's 20 run stop animations we would have to modify. That's 40, 48. And then actually, I miscalculated. We have to modify all of these too. So every single one of these would have to be modified. So that's 48, 58, 68, 70, 72, at least 72. And then we have these jump animations. And these jump animations will end in the idles as well. Some of them do. Some of them land in the idles. As you can see right here, you just transitioned into an idle. You would have that idle would have to be changed to your idle, and therefore this one would have to be modified. So if I had to guess without actually going through and checking every single animation, I would say there's between 75 and 100 animations you would have to modify. So would you rather modify all those animations or would you rather use this technique? And that was my goal here. My goal was to present a plausible approach to this that would not be outside of the realm of possibility for a lot of people. I wanted to find a kind of workaround that would help us avoid having to replace all those animations or modify them. So that's actually that's actually why we transitioned back into the idle. And that's also all, let's see, that's all also covers that one as well. Because if I were to do this properly, that's probably how I would do it, because it is actually the proper way to do it. But it's going to be really time consuming. And it's going to take a long time to modify all those animations and make them look good. Oh, thank God I killed that gnat. That thing was driving me nuts. Okay. I don't know. These gnats came out of nowhere. And it seems like every time I kill one, another one pops up. So how they are made, that part at least is fairly simple. So I can cover that as far as the transitions go and the actual idle. Now the actual idle, I got that from Mixamo, and I'll go over how I did that, because I did have to modify it. So basically, this, well, I'm not going to go over how they're set up yet. I'm going to go over that next. I didn't actually write that down. So what I did is I actually added more frames on the front of this than what I actually needed. And I went through several iterations of this, guys. Let me see. I probably should have prepped this. As you can see, I was trying to make a more realistic looking transition, and I was trying different methods, but in the end, I just wasn't happy with any of them. I'm going to load this one. So basically what I did over here in Cascader is I imported the first 10 frames of this idle animation. And then I transitioned, over here on the end, I imported the first frame of the fight idle animation. And then I just created a transition here, and I applied physics right here with all of this enabled right here. I turned all of those on, and I worked on the interval. I selected this interval right here, and I said work on interval, and then I enabled it. And as you can see, it's only applying it on this interval, excluding these frames right here. So that's basically how I did it right there. I did the same thing for the transition from. I imported the first 10 frames of that, and I will see if I can find that one right here. And I should have made this one longer. I didn't make this one long enough. Oh, this was one of my first attempts at making a transition from without making them hop. The one that I did the first time was the one I'm actually looking for. Let me see if I can. This is probably it right here. No, I don't even know, guys. Let's see, let's try this one. No, anyway, so the point is that I imported the first 10 frames of that idle, and then I just imported the first frame of the other idle, and then I just set some key frames right here. I haven't actually applied physics to this one, and this one is incomplete, actually. I scrapped it and started over. So the reason why I did 10 frames is because I wanted to kind of buffer in case I needed to blend it more. The reason why is because you don't want the blend to happen, for example, like right here. If the blend happens, say, right here on this frame, and this is 0.5 seconds in. And let's say that our blend time is 0.25, then we won't be fully blended in until right here in the timeline where he's already up in the air. So in this case, it's not really that big of a deal if that were to happen. But in a lot of cases, if he's not jumping and he's actually moving his feet, if he's keeping 1 foot planted and moving only 1 foot at a time, then in that case, if it were to blend in while he was moving his feet, then it would cause the act of blending would cause foot sliding, because it's going to offset the pelvis, which the legs are attached to. And since it's blending the pelvis between the two pelvis positions, that's going to drag the feet along with it. So you always want some kind of, whenever you're doing these transitions, I mean, you don't have to, but it's good to have some space to work with right here at the front. I only ended up using 3 of these frames right here for the blend, but in actuality, since this is motion matching, it could pick any position within this open area right here. And that brings me to the setup. So right here, I'm actually excluding the first 7 frames from the database. That makes the animation basically start at frame 7 rather than frame 0. And how I did that was I right-clicked and added a notify state. And I set a exclude from database post search notify state. And I just extended it along the first 7 frames. Also added a block transition notify state, and that's going to block the motion matching from picking any frame between frame 10 and frame 37 in this case to start the animation. Basically, it means that it has to start the animation. It has to choose a place between frame 7 and frame 10 to start the animation. Lastly, I created a new notify track, and on that one, I added an override continuing pose cost to bias. And what this does is it lowers the cost of continuing the animation by 1 point. And so it's much more likely to play this animation all the way through. If you need to set that modifier below -1, then it's very possible that there's something wrong in your animation that doesn't quite line up with stuff. And so it's basically more expensive to stay to continue playing this animation than to jump out of it. That would be why you might need to lower it below -1, but -1 is the default value, and it's a very good value. So in every case that I've seen so far where I've needed to lower that below -1, it was because I was overlooking something that I needed to fix on the animation. So you'll notice that I have these 3 curves right here. This one actually isn't even needed. As you can see, the value is 0, 0. I added that just to make sure though. So these are the important ones right here. I will go over that in a later video perhaps. So if you look over on animation data modifiers, that's under window, animation data modifiers. If you check that, it'll open up this window right here. And I'm just going to remove that modifier. But you can add the foot speed L and foot speed R anim modifiers, and then just press apply. The default values are fine. And what it'll do is it'll map out a curve for the speed at which the feet are moving at. And that's used by the post search schema when post searching in certain situations. So that basically covers that. Well, actually, I did not go over the actual fight offensive here. You'll notice I added those to that one as well. I'll just remove that curve. Curves do have a cost, guys. So if you don't need a curve, remove it. So basically on this one, I just brought this in from Mixamo, and I retargeted it to the UEFN. And if the pelvis is offset, or if the root has a rotational offset on it, then you'll have to fix it. I'm probably going to just do a dedicated video for bringing stuff in like this and setting up your own idles. I'll do that later. Not this weekend, but maybe next weekend I'll do that. If you guys want, you can try to remind me in case I forget. But yeah, I'm probably not going to go over that right now because honestly, I don't remember. So I'll have to see if there's any problems whenever we do that in order to remember exactly what it was I needed to fix at the time. At the moment, though, I just don't remember. So alternative transition and why I didn't do it a specific way. So there are alternative approaches to playing the transition animation, and I'm just going to close that out. Right. So yeah, okay, let me just show you the transition first. There's an alternative transition in here. So I'm kind of skipping ahead here so that I can show you this, but I think it's probably best that I just go ahead and show you. This is going to be an alternative in the next update, and I'm not really happy with it because it doesn't really seem too realistic to me. I personally think that if I were to transition out of this pose right here in real life, that I would probably push off of one foot while keeping the other foot in place. And then I would just reposition one foot. I might kick off the forward foot and keep the back one in place, or I might kick off the back one and keep the forward one in place. I might slightly reposition the other foot after I've planted my other foot, but it wouldn't be by much. Now, the reason why I don't do that in here is because it requires root motion. So these are being played from the enum graph inside of here, and anything played from the enum graph by default, the root motion is just ignored. They're not driven. Sequences played on the enum graph they're not root motion driven. The motion matching system does analyze the root motion for post-searching reasons, but it does not actually use that root motion to drive the capsule that the character is inside of. And so, because this one starts right here and this one ends right here, the pelvis has to match up in this one where it is in the actual idle loop. Otherwise, if it doesn't, then you'll get foot sliding. Whenever it blends out of this into the actual idle loop, it'll slide across the ground if the pelvis position doesn't match. And so in order to transition out of this one on one foot, you would need to blend the root bone from where it is in this one to where it would be in this one if this foot was if that foot right there stayed right here, then and you move to this foot up right here, then the pelvis would be right here, and the root would need to blend over here. If you did that and you played it as a montage, then it would probably look more appropriate. But I feel like it's a bit inappropriate to play transitions as montages. I may experiment with that later, and if I think that it's justified, then I'll redo this alternative right here, and I'll set it up as maybe a dynamic and a montage that gets played from the event graph right here inside of here. So that's basically kind of what they did in ALS in some instances, like for the procedural foot correction system. They played them as those animations as dynamic montages from the event graph. So I may look into that, and that may be a better approach to it. But it's not going to be in this update that I experiment with that. I may experiment with that next week. So where they are stored and played from. They're stored in the post-search databases. The transition from fight offensive is stored in the normal idle database. I duplicated this idle database. Let me just show you. I duplicated this, and I renamed this one with underscore custom at the end to identify this as the idle custom or the custom idle. And so if you open up that one, you'll see this has the transition to fight offensive, and it has the fight offensive animation as well. Now, if on the idle one, if you want to try out the other idle, I kind of think that the hop looks better, and I will redo this hop animation to be slightly longer and have a better, more realistic physical animation to it. The reason why it looks a little stiff here is because I was trying to make it too short, and then I realized later that coming out of the fight stance, I don't really need that to be super fast, so I actually can't afford like maybe 10 more frames on it. So I'll go back and add maybe 10 more frames onto this one so that the physical motion looks more accurate. I don't have a proper recovery at the end of this one. That's the reason why it looks stiff at the end. But if you want, you can disable this one by pressing this eyeball and then press the eyelash on this one to enable this one. And so if you do that and you change back, that's what you get. So it's up to you which one you prefer, really, but I thought I'd give you guys an alternative. And like I said, I'll revisit this one maybe next week and maybe make it a dynamic montage on the event graph. So we'll see. So that's the database. So if we go to the chooser, this is the dense chooser. This is the actual chooser database. And if our database LOD is currently dense, and this is automatically, I think, regulated in the background for us, based off of distance from the player, maybe. I'm not real sure. I haven't looked into that yet. But if you browse to this one and open up this one, that's the one I was in just a second ago. And this is the one that you'll see, at least for sure, whenever you're close up. So If you see this stand idles right here, this is a nested chooser. And there's different nested choosers in here. And if you press the edit button, it'll take you inside that nested chooser. And it's like a chooser, only it's a chooser inside of a chooser rather than a completely separate chooser. Like this one right here is. The dense one is a separate chooser, but these are actually inside of this dense chooser. Now I replaced the idle post search database right here with another nested chooser called idle. And I didn't change any of these settings right here, so it'll still select it based off the same criteria. If we go inside of it though, you'll see that it'll select the idle custom if we are in the custom idle state. If we are in any other state, it'll just choose the regular normal idle that it would normally have playing. So that covers that. So how to blend into those quickly using enum notify states. So I'll go ahead and play, and I don't know if it's going to crash. It didn't. Okay. So you'll notice that right here, I'm blending into it fairly quickly. And some of y'all may not realize that I'm blending into it so quickly. But if you look at this, stop, let's see, you'll see it's pretty short. Only a few frames long. And let's see, this is the stop that just played. And it's the same length as the other one. It's pretty short. And then it just blends into the other one. So if we go into the regular state and we do a stop, you'll notice right here that it's actually quite a bit longer. So right about here is probably where it's blending out on ours, completely blending out. So all of this right here would normally be what you'd have to wait for before you would transition back into the idle. But I found a way around that. And I mean, it's probably the best approach I've found. I've played around with probably about a dozen different ideas, and this was the only one that really didn't have any serious issues related to it, and so it's the one I went with. And it basically just takes advantage of enum notifies. So I'll open it up and show you what I mean. So right here is the window where it's going to start blending into that stop, and then it'll just continue playing until it's interrupted by the idle database, or until it finishes completely playing. And as you can see, it's a pretty long, this is in Unreal Engine, animations are 30 frames per second. So this is several seconds long. Right here at this last fall event, and in case you guys didn't know, these fall events are just basically sounds. Those are what are responsible for playing the sounds whenever you take a step. And on the last one is normally where the last foot gets placed. And that's basically where we are fully blended in to, or at least our feet are in their final resting place where they will be at in the idle animation. And so if we just create an enum notify, and I named mine feet planted. And so this lets me know on the enum graph, hey, both feet are planted. You can now interrupt this and do an early out into the idle animation, or the idle transition animation. And that's basically what I'm doing over here on the event graph. I have this enum notify state, and I have this boolean called feet planted. I'm waiting 2 seconds here. Oh yeah, and by the way, this is going to be cleaned up later. I still have trash laying around from my experimentations. But anyway, so the feet are planted. I wait 2 ticks, and then I reset this variable. Why do I wait 2 ticks? Well, the reason why is because this anim notify, it's just a timing thing. Basically, by the time this anim notify fires, we may have just started our tick, or we may be halfway through our tick. We don't really know. And so what ends up happening is if we just wait 1 tick, then this variable will be checked, and it'll think that it's false because this hasn't set it to true yet, or it'll check it and it'll be false, and then immediately after it checks it and thinks it's false, this one will be checked, and then before the next tick, it's already set back to false. So I have to delay it for 2 ticks. You could theoretically just do a single delay here, like this, and just set it to 0.1. And in fact, you might replace it with something like that. But I wanted to keep it as short as possible, and 2 ticks seemed to work for me. If I see any bugs popping up related to this later on, I might just replace it with a single delay of maybe 0.1 seconds. So anyway, this is being handled. If we go to the anim graph, you'll see this is the motion matching node right here. Now every time this updates, basically on a tick, every time this ticks, this motion matching node, it's going to call this update motion matching function. Inside of here, it's going to evaluate the chooser and decide which database we should be searching from next. And so in most cases, we do not interrupt the current database. And what that means is basically if we're playing a stop animation, and since stops happen when we're in an idle state, so let me just show you here. So we have these 2 movement states, idle and moving. Stops and idles both happen whenever we are in an idle state. And if you go to your pose, if I can find it, I done, oh, okay, right. Yeah, so stops happen based off of this criteria right here. But when we're in a stop, when we're playing a stop animation, we actually transition into one of these idle databases. But the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand is that unless you interrupt it, the last animation that was playing in this one, if we're playing this animation right here, and let's say we get right here to this point, and this returns the idle database right here, but we're still playing this animation right here, even though we've reached this point and the chooser has returned to the idle database, we will not stop playing this animation. We'll continue playing this animation until it's either over, or there's or the post search decides that it costs less to start playing an idle than it does to continue playing this animation to the end. And so because of that, if we don't interrupt it, it'll just keep playing until the animation is over. And that's where this logic down here comes in, right here. So I had to add some custom logic to this. This was an experimentation, by the way. if you go in here, you'll see I haven't completely removed it. That was my first ideal before I decided to just set up some custom logic in here. And this other method actually works. Basically what I'm doing is I'm getting the delta time of this context, and whenever we enter this idle state, I start adding that delta time to the current value of this variable, and that basically lets me know how long I've been in this idle movement state. And whenever we leave the idle movement state because we started moving, then I just reset it. And what this does is I can say back over here, I can say, okay, if this value is greater than or equal to 0.7, then we've been playing a stop animation for 70% of a second. And so we can interrupt it as soon as that criteria is met. And that does work, but then you just have this static variable. And I decided to go with this enum notify state because, oh, give me a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I set an alarm so I wouldn't forget about it. I had a soda in the freezer, and I didn't want it to explode all over the inside of my fridge because I've done that actually several times, and it's a mess to clean up. So anyway, yeah, the reason why I went with this enum notify method was because it gives me precise timing on a per animation basis, which allows me to transition out of that idle animation faster if I need to. So you may like that other ideal better, but that's on you. This method seems a little bit more complex because I guess it is. But basically, this right here means that we should try to interrupt it if we're moving from a custom idle, from the custom idle state into one of these other states. So if we're moving from this custom idle state into the rifle, pistol, or unarmed, then we should try to interrupt it. And the reason why is because, and in actuality, it will interrupt it. And the reason why is because we don't want to have to wait until the custom idle loop animation has completely played before it transitions into the new idle stance, because that could take several seconds, or it may not happen at all. It might just keep looping through that custom idle animation and never transition. And that's the reason why we interrupt it right here using this logic. Or if we are in the custom idle state, then we want to try to interrupt it. And I could have put this right here, but then it would be evaluating it every tick right here from the selector. So I decided to only evaluate this logic if we actually are in the custom idle state, or we just left it. So that's the reason why I did that. This right here is basically saying that if we are idle and we're not playing a turn in place animation, then we can interrupt it. Because we don't want to interrupt the turn in place animations. We want them to play all the way through. If we do interrupt them, then the character won't completely turn. And the reason why is because of the way that this system is set up in here with the steering and all of that. If the turn in place animation plays halfway through, you're only going to rotate half the amount of that turn in place animation. And so things are going to become misaligned if you interrupt it. So we don't want to interrupt turn in place animations. Right down here, I'm basically saying that if we're playing a stop animation and we've reached the feet planted position, then we want to interrupt that. And then down here, I'm saying if we're currently in an idle state and our last state was not a stop animation, then that means that we're moving from one idle to another idle and we can transition. We can interrupt it. I probably explained that better down here. I don't know. Anyway, you can read through my comments. So that part was kind of long, sorry, but I wanted to try to explain this logic as best I can. It's a little confusing. Yeah, so I already actually explained how and why we interrupt database changes. How turn-in-place comes into this and the challenges it presents. Right, so this does present some challenges, and it kind of looks funny the way I have it set up now, and next week I'll probably end up replacing this with that alternative method. But you'll see that we do get some foot sliding, and I guess it doesn't look that bad. It kind of looks like he's hopping, but I mean, if you're like on gravel, that might make sense, but in a lot of cases it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense that he can just slide his feet so easily into a position like that, unless he's on like a waxed floor and he's in slippers, then maybe. But it does look kind of funny. So I have this button G that you can press for the alternative one, and this actually uses motion warping. It just uses two animations that I made and motion warping and a little bit of logic. I went over that in the last video, but I guess I can go ahead and go back over it again. I'm trying not to make this too long, but I think I've already went over 30 minutes. Oh well. So that all happens basically from the character blueprint. Right here. So I'm getting the delta between the root post offset root bone. So I'll show you that. So this offset root bone offsets the root bone. So if you get the root bone directly from the skeleton, it won't be the same as what it is after this offset root bone is applied. And that's the reason why you have to get it from this. And so you'll see this little tag down here. It says offset root. And that's the actual tag that we've assigned to it. And so we can actually use that tag on the event graph. And that's what they did. I didn't do this. This was their technique. Inside of here, they're getting the anim node reference to that offset root. And they're getting the transform of it. And they're storing that into the root transform. That's what I'm getting. So I'm getting that root transform, and I'm getting the rotation off of it. I'm getting the angle between the root rotation, which is basically the forward direction, and the base aim rotation. And then based off the Z, if the Z is greater than 0, then it should be a left turn animation that plays. Otherwise, it should be a right turn. I'm setting the warp target rotation to be that of the aim rotation, so that it motion warps towards the angle of the base aim rotation. And so if we open up these animations, you'll see I have motion warping here. And I have the target name set to rotate. I have warp translation disabled because we do not have a translational offset, or a locational offset, I should say. On the root bone, we only have a rotational offset where it's rotating. And so if you select the root, and let me just do this, so you can see the root bone rotating right here. I don't start rotating the root bone until the feet come up off the ground, and then I stop rotating it as soon as they're planted onto the ground. So that's the full 90 degrees here. And you can see that it starts at 0 and goes to negative 90. There's a slight level of precision discrepancy in Unreal, but it is 90. It is a total of 90. I don't know why sometimes you get this slight discrepancy, but anyway, that's irrelevant. So basically, what I'm saying is I might set up a system later where this happens on the actual event graph somewhere on here, and it may play as a dynamic montage from the event graph, along with maybe that transition to idle from fight animation that I do later. And so I'll try setting up a system that handles all of that from here for that custom, because I think that looks more appropriate than trying to rotate in place like this, because it just looks a little weird. Blending into it looks weird. Blending out of it looks fine, but there's just no good way. I mean, you could create a transition to that, but it would slow down the whole act of turning in place, and it may look a little weird as well. Why is he going into a different stance just so he can rotate in place? You know what I mean? Like, I think that other one looks a little bit better. If you're in a fighting situation, you may actually hop around like that. I don't know. But anyway, that covers that. Yeah, so that basically covers it, guys. I guess that's the video. And I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.